A very good evening to all our viewers. I'm Shivani Srivastav, Relationships Manager at Global Education and Training Institute. I welcome you all this evening to this live session with Dr. Sampadananda Mishra, who is very passionate about Sanskrit. Currently, he is the director of Sri Aurobindo Foundation for Indian Culture. This foundation was, you know, came into existence. This was established in 1995. And since then, he has been keenly dedicated towards this. He has published a number of books and has worked on a number of audiovisual projects. Today, he will be addressing us all and speaking on a new education for a new world. So, I once again welcome Sir, and over to you, Sir, for further things.
So, namaskar to all of you. Today, the topic which has been decided is a new education for a new world. Now, the question comes, are we living in an old world? And what is it meant by the new world? Now, let me clarify you on this that the condition in which we live, the humanity lives at present, if we look at the whole evolutionary journey of the mankind and look at the whole history of humanity from various angles, we will see that the condition in which we live is the result of the state of our consciousness. And this consciousness is the human consciousness, especially, is an evolving consciousness. So it keeps evolving. So when the consciousness, manifests the supreme consciousness, that one indivisible consciousness, which manifests as the multiplicity. So, if we look at the whole spiritual history of the world and how it has been described, the realizations of the seers and sages, how it has been described, we will see that this consciousness, starting from the plant, starting from the stone to plant to animal, now it has, like it becomes the man. So, it is considered that man is the summit of this creation if of this whole evolutionary journey. But man also has its own story of evolution, how it is evolving. The human consciousness, though it is at the summit of the creation at present, we say that humanity or the human being is the highest creation. There is no doubt about it, but it is not the final. So that's what we learn from the writings of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and uh, many other spiritual masters also have touched upon it, but not the way Sri Aurobindo and the mother have spoken about this new consciousness of the new world. So man is just a transitional being, and the present condition of the man is not that it is at the final stage, it is in the making towards another being or another creation which is yet to manifest, and which is supreme to, which is superior to the present state of consciousness. So if the world in which we live at present is the condition, is the result of the state of consciousness, so when we want anything to change, so by changing the outer system, that by changing by through policy, through governance, or through anything, is not going to change the world. The only way of changing the world is can take place, can happen by changing the consciousness. So when we are talking about education, so this education is designed by again this limited instrumentation we call the human mind. So, how far the education system that we have created, the education system which is there all around, how far it has satisfied or how far it is serving the purpose of bringing or preparing itself for the next step, next level of consciousness, so that we need to evaluate. Now, if we look at the present system of education, that we find that it is an utter crisis. So, where the whole process of education, if we look at it, the process of education, it involves the learners, it involves the facilitators, the teachers, it involves the curriculum, it involves the syllabus, textbook, and training program, and so many other things related to whatever is related to the whole process of education or what is happening in the name of education. If we evaluate it properly, we will see that how much we are losing, we are ignorant about the true purpose of education. So, all the teachers who are teaching, imparting education, all the learners who are getting education, all the policymakers, the owners of the schools, the whole management system, whatever we, like whoever is involved in this system of education, we find that no true education is really taking place. In the name of education, what is happening is that we are creating a bunch of products which serve the purpose of or which enrich that industrial mindset which has created this system, and it enriches that industrial mind, that that mindset by sacrificing the most beautiful aspects of one's own life. So there's no education to understand oneself. So this is where, when we want to talk about education, when we are concerned about bringing certain change, so that change has to be the change of consciousness. And when we are talking about a new education for the new world, that new world is going to be the world of a new consciousness, a consciousness which is higher than the present human consciousness, or the higher than the mind, the mental consciousness of the human being. Now this new education, what how it has to be is not completely a new system that has been given to us. Say, for example, like how Sri Aurobindo has given us a system of education which uh, gives us that hope for the new world, or many other educationists, educational philosophers who have given us, who have shown us a different system, or who have shown us a way how this new education can take place to bring a change, a proper change, and it will be different from the present state of education or present system of education. Though these things, they seem to be new, yet in seed form, in essential forms, it was all there in ancient system of education. So while designing a new system of education, or while talking about a new system of education, we need to contemplate on the ancient Indian system of education, which has the seed of what we are thinking about, or what has been said about the new education for a new world. Now, the ancient Indian system of education, when we contemplate on it, we see that it was much concerned about satisfying or fulfilling the very purpose of education. Now, education, it has been defined variously by various people. And the most amazing definition that we find, and many people who are familiar with this definition, is that what Swami Vivekananda has given, that education is to manifest the perfection which is already within. To manifest the perfection which is already within. So, towards which we should move is towards perfection. And what is meant by perfection is not some kind of professionalism or meticulousness, but again, Swami Vivekananda has very clearly defined about what he means by this perfection, which is already within every one of us. So, when he says that education is to manifest the perfection already within, so he refers to that inmost being, that Atman, that, or very roughly, it can be translated as the soul, that inmost being, which is ever perfect. Ever perfect means it knows the truth, it is in contact with the divine, it has that light. It contains the light, it contains the right, it contains the truth in it, it contains the divinity within it. So, by perfection, what is meant is the divine. The divinity, the divine who is ever present within every one of us, which is the core essence of our consciousness, is something which should matter while we are educating ourselves. When we come to Sri Aurobindo and the the mother was his spiritual partner, and both of them, they also have spoken extensively on this new education. And we find it in the ancient Indian system of education, this which has defined education by articulating it in two words. It says, Atmanam Vidhi, know thyself. Now, just all the viewers who are viewing it, or all those who are going to view this in future, I am asking this question: how much our education system has made us aware of ourselves? How many times we have heard from our teacher that we should ask this fundamental question to ourselves, that what is the source of me? And me means like, what is the source of my creation? How am I created? Where from I am coming? And what is the journey? And where should I go? What is my final destination? We don't, our education system has never told us, has never encouraged us to find out this answer to this question. Were contemplated on various other things like how to secure marks, how to get a good position, how to get a good job, how to settle in life, how to earn good amount of money. But it is, what we are missing is various important aspects of our own life. It doesn't teach us like how should I live my life rightfully, purposefully, satisfying the very purpose of my birth, very purpose of like why I have come on this earth, why I have taken birth. So this is where the ancient system of education, it says, the rishis say the very purpose of life, the very purpose of yoga, the very purpose of education is Atmanam Vidhi, that you must know yourself. And by knowing oneself, that one can know others. Only by knowing oneself, only by having mastery over oneself, that one can understand others, and one can even have control over the external world. If one doesn't have the control over oneself, one cannot have the control over the outer circumstances, what happens in the outer world. So the change has to come, must come. Everyone feels that there needs to be, this change has to take place. We must change. Everything must change. But change of what? Not just changing the outer aspects, the outer forms, the system. It is not the that we should bring a change in the system of education, but system can change by making certain rules, certain policies, and all these things. But if the focus is not to change, if the program is not organized in order to bring change in the human consciousness, then it is going to be utter failure. So when we are talking about the education or new education for a new world, first thing is that that new world is going to be a world of a new consciousness. And that consciousness is higher than the present consciousness in which the humanity lives. So the education system has to be, or everything has to be organized in the name of education. While imparting education, it has to be taken care of that how the present human consciousness, the conditions in which it is there, the state in which it is there, the human consciousness. So, how it can facilitate the system of education or the whole education itself, how it can bring that change or facilitate that change of consciousness, or how it facilitates, so then it moves, it transcends, it goes beyond this limited consciousness and then has an entry into the world of that new consciousness, or how it allows that new consciousness which is already manifest on this earth. So how we prepare ourselves, so then we allow that consciousness to operate within ourselves. That higher consciousness operates with higher principles. It can operate, it can regulate things when it is allowed under certain conditions, not merely. And allowing it means there has to be enormous amount of preparation. So the education system that we are talking, the new education, for which can prepare us for allowing that new consciousness which is beyond, which is higher, which is more powerful than the present human consciousness. So that is how we organize everything and then create a system of education, that new system of education, which prepares us strongly for allowing that supreme consciousness or new consciousness to work out things in a different way. And for that purpose, what we need to educate, how we need to educate ourselves or our children, or the system that we bring, which can bring that change right from the beginning. So there are a lot of elements which we need to take care. One thing is that this education, the new education that is conceived by many educational philosophers, many spiritual leaders, starting from the ancient times till the modern times, the seers and sages, that this education does not begin from the school. This education doesn't begin after the child is born. The education begins much before the child is born. The process of this education begins much before the conception takes place. Today, when we look at the world, how the children are born, to a great extent, and truly great extent, you can put it something like 95, 96, 97 percentage of children are born by accident. When it happened, no one knows. Suddenly one day, the woman discovers that, oh, I'm pregnant. There's so much of unconscious, mechanical, robotic happening that takes place that we are not conscious of what is happening within ourselves. We are performing and executing and operating in this world like a machine with no awareness, with no consciousness. Everything is just mechanical, and that's not life, that's not education. We know how to live. Live means how to fill our stomach, just sustain this body, and little bit of, enjoyment, fine enjoyment, worldly enjoyment. But we don't know how to live life rightfully, purposefully, because we lack that education. So when we are talking about this new education, it is not an education which is prescribed or which is being suggested for the schools and colleges and the universities, but it is something which is concerned with every human being. It is concerned with every human being. And it has to, the true education has to happen much before a child is born. So, therefore, what the ancient seers and sages had prescribed, they had prescribed a certain number of rituals to take place when a man and woman come together for leading the household life. They had set a purpose. The purpose of the man and woman coming together is to carry forward this lineage, this prajatantu, this population. But at the same time, they also cautioned, they also very consciously articulated and created programs in a manner that this carrying forward of the population by coming two physical beings to opposite sex, they coming together for the purpose of carrying forward the population should not be mechanical. The child should not be an unwanted child or mechanically born, machine like born child. Today there are, advertisement that why should a woman depend upon a man for having a child? The system, the science and technology it has developed, it can help having a child without having a partner, without having the opposite sex. Where is the world going? The giving birth to child is not something which is like a machine producing something. Even animals also give birth to their children. So when it comes to giving birth to the human child, it is not just the man and woman coming together. Of course, that is necessary so far as the present human consciousness, the present human state is concerned, that we need this biological happening, that the man and woman they have to come together physically in order to have this uh, happening. But how the man and woman they should come together? How should that purpose be fulfilled? Not mechanically, but how that can become a conscious process. This is where the ancient seers and sages had contributed a lot. There are many spiritual leaders, the many spiritual masters, many mystics who have spoken about it. Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they have spoken extensively about it. Then the true new world or new population which can be created which can take care of, which can operate by following the new principles or the laws and processes of that new consciousness or higher consciousness. So this is where, when we turn to the Vedas, we turn to the Upanishads, the ancient sacred texts by the seers and sages. It says that Janaya Divyam Janam. What is expected is that to create a conscious population, not an unwanted mechanical population. So it refers again to the very purpose of life, the very purpose of education, the very purpose of yoga. It must satisfy this, that from the present state of animality, however advanced we may be mentally, however advanced we may be intellectually, however advanced we may be, but at the material level, at the physical level, we are not very far from the animal consciousness. As the animals operate by instincts, by impulses, to a great extent, we are led by our instincts, we are led by our impulses, we are operative by the dictation of our lower nature, the movements of the lower nature. We get angry, we have lust, we have greed, we have jealousy, all sorts of things which belong to the lower nature. Yet we call ourselves educated. That itself shows that a true education has not been imparted to all of us. We don't know. So that is where this old system has been going on. This must be broken, and a new system has to be brought into the place, keeping in the mind that it must prepare us for allowing that new consciousness to operate and take hold of our life, and then help us in this evolutionary journey towards the achievement, towards the realization of that supreme perfection that already lies within us. So, this is where the prenatal education has, while designing the system, while bringing a change in the system of education, the prenatal education, principles of the prenatal education, right from the Vedic period till date, whoever, all the spiritually realized masters of the realized souls, mystics who have spoken about it, they all must be taken into consideration and then must be a part of the education system. So then, when the man and woman come with this consciousness, when a child becomes the result not just of the conjugal enjoyment of the man and woman, but when the child becomes the result of an aspiration, strong, pure aspiration, higher aspiration, and prayers, when the great souls who are waiting to manifest on this earth are invoked to manifest, when the man and woman they come together to prepare that kshetra, prepare that adhara, prepare that base, prepare that soul, so then that those higher souls can manifest, prepare those conditions, then something beautiful can take place, something amazing can take place. The true purpose of life, true purpose of education can serve its purpose, can take place. So when we are talking about this new education, this is what is meant, that it has to start not from the school but much before the child is born. So the man and woman they come together consciously. This entire process has to be a conscious process of giving birth to the divine children. I mean, all children are divine, everyone is divine, but we are not aware of that divinity. So the whole process has to be transcending from our animal consciousness, getting rid of, transcending it, transforming it, going beyond it, and realizing our inner potentiality and realizing our own, uh, you know, the divinity, and realizing that perfection within, then realizing the true human consciousness. So the whole journey has to be from the man animal to the man human to the man divine. When we are talking about this new education system, this education system has to be designed in a manner by which the uh, the process, the system helps us to transcend from our state of animality to the state of manness, or that human consciousness, the man human, to the man divine. If it doesn't help us in realizing that man divine, it is not just a man making education. Of course, that is very much needed, but it is again one step forward. It is the divine man making education. So, this new system of education for the new world is a divine man making education which helps in the process, in the realization of that perfection which is already within in the seed form, in the potential form, to bring it to the dynamic state. So, with this, I end my sharing. If there are questions, I will address to that.
Well, thank you so much, sir. That was indeed beautifully explained. I do have a question here. Since you were talking about the consciousness and unconsciousness, and since we are talking about education, it is something, you talked about parents and their children. I want to bring in teachers here, and I want to ask that how can the teachers help awaken the unconsciousness within the child?
How can the teachers help?
How can the teachers awaken which is unconscious
Yes.
within the child?
Okay. Okay. So the teachers do have a great role to play. So therefore, the first the teachers should know, should be aware of themselves. They should know that why they are a teacher, why someone is a teacher, what is meant by teaching, what is the purpose of education, how a child has to be taught, what kind of environment he should create, what kind of space he should create or teacher should create, so then the child is properly educated. So this is where the teacher needs to be more and more conscious of himself. So that is why the whole process has to begin. It has to start with this, that to be conscious of ourselves. Whether it is the teacher, it is the father or mother or any other member, the whole purpose and everything has to begin.
Right. I think there is some network issues from sir's end, but yes, I think he has beautifully and very precisely explained about the consciousness, unconsciousness, what should come from within, and all these things.
Just 1 minute.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, there was
So there was a little bit of problem, so I re-logged in from the
no
uh,
problem, sir.
mobile phone.
Yeah.
So what I said, that the teacher has to be conscious first. He has to bring in much awareness. He has to be clear about the very purpose of life, very purpose of education, and the process by which he can create that consciousness and awareness in the children. The teachers do have a major role to play, but the teacher also, like, it is not just teaching. The teacher is also an extended parent. He has a greater responsibility, but he needs to train himself first, be conscious of himself.
He should know what is it meant by being conscious of oneself. So another kind of higher level of training is needed for the teacher to know this and then work out things in the classroom environment so then he can materialize this new system of education of making the child aware of himself. And there are
Right.
various kinds of activities, various kinds of, you know, uh, things which can be worked out by the teacher to create this awareness in the children.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. That was wonderfully explained. And I hope all the educators and all our viewers would benefit from what you have just told. With this, we come to an end to today's session. And I would like to thank Sir again for joining in and being a part of GETI's disruptive education movement. We'll meet again soon with another informative session. Until then, thank you and good night.